So welcome to week 5 of our Lenten message series, Seriously, God? Making sense of life when life doesn't make any sense. Now, you may remember that last week we looked at why God seems to allow all the wrong people to be in charge. We talked about the call of Moses. We talked about how God was moved when his people suffered under corrupt leadership and responded by leading them to a better place. And we talked about the possibility that God may be calling each of us to some leadership role. Today, we'll look at times in life when we are doing all the right things, but it seems like God is totally uncooperative. So, for example, you work hard at your job, but your company is a total disaster. You're all in on your marriage, but your in-laws are constantly interfering. You've taken good care of yourself your whole life, and then all of a sudden, you find yourself debilitated by a serious health issue. And in each of these situations, God seems to be absolutely no help whatsoever. So what do? We grumble. We grumble. We say, seriously, God? And that's what happens in this gospel. So Luke tells us over and over again throughout the gospel that the Jewish leaders grumbled because Jesus welcomed sinners. And they didn't like that. In their minds, God is for religious people only. Sinners need not apply. Not only did God welcome sinners, but did Jesus welcome sinners, but he seemed to be rubbing it in the face of the religious elites. So they did what we do. They grumbled. And today, Jesus responds, the parable of the Prodigal Son. So we'll look at the story from the perspective of the older brother, because the older brother is really the stand-in for the religious leaders to whom this parable was originally addressed. So let's pick up the story from after the younger brother has come home. His father is throwing him that great big party. The older son, coming in from the fields, hears the music, asks what's going on, and at this point, it's awfully easy to sympathize with the older brother. The younger brother is a total screw-up. But the older brother, there he is, dutifully doing his job, doing what he's supposed to be doing. And I'm sure that the original audience of this story, the scribes and the Pharisees, I'm sure they could relate. Now, as we heard, when the older brother learns of his brother's return, he becomes furious. He makes a big scene by refusing to enter the house. So his father comes out to him, just as he had come out to the younger brother before he even arrived home. And you can just imagine the scene. You can just imagine the guests at the party sort of drifting outside from inside the house to watch this spectacle, to watch what's all this ruckus about out here. So there, in front of everybody, the older brother blasts his father. I have slaved for you for years. I've obeyed all your stupid orders, and you never even gave me a goat. Basically, he's admitting to the real reason that he's been working for his father all along. It isn't out of love. It's to earn a reward. To him, the father-son relationship ultimately is a business transaction and nothing more. The younger brother rebelled to get the money. The older brother obeyed to get the money. Neither seemed interested in the relationship. But the older brother's attitude may be the worst of the two. And herein lies an important warning for us. When you rebel against God, walk away from the church, at least it's clear what you're doing. It's regrettable, and it can lead to big trouble, but it's clear. What's far more dangerous is to stay in the church, obeying all the rules, but never entering into the relationship. That's dangerous because it can twist our thinking. We begin to think as the older brother thinks. I've been conscientious. I've held up my end. So now I'm entitled to some payback. We begin to think that God owes us. Hear that. We begin to think that God Almighty is heavily indebted to us. That is twisted thinking. It isn't wrongdoing that keeps the older brother out of his father's house. It's righteousness. That's a dangerous trap that we can fall into, isn't it? But back to the story. Having blasted the father, the older son now turns on his younger brother. When your son, not my brother, when your son returns having swallowed up all your property with prostitutes, for him you kill the fatted calf. I think at this point it's kind of easy to say the older brother does have a point. It doesn't seem fair that the father should throw this lavish party for the delinquent son. And you know what? It isn't fair. But here we should be very careful. We should never demand fairness of God. The gospel never pretends to be fair. It is way more than fair. You and I are loved by God far more than we could ever earn. The father in the parable doesn't give either son what they deserve. Instead, he lavishes extravagant grace, extravagant forgiveness on both sons, as he does with each of us. My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice because your brother was dead and has come to life again. The older son can share the father's riches at any time. He has only to ask. But in that moment, he needed to stop grumbling and share his father's great joy at the return of his lost son. In Jesus' day, the religious leaders were constantly grumbling because he didn't show them the respect they thought they deserved. Their small-minded grumbling caused them to miss the big picture. They missed out on the invitation to celebrate God's grace. They missed out on the fact that God was calling other people along with them to himself. They missed out on sharing the great abundance that comes from living in genuine relationship with God. So here's the challenge. Let's set all grumbling aside. Grumbling never leads us to God. It only undermines a joyful relationship with God. And it twists our thinking, as it did the older brother. It can mislead us into thinking that God owes us. God has given us the kingdom. All that God has is ours. When we stop saying, "Seriously, God?" we can finally possess the inheritance that is ours already.